I'm at the Carolinas Aviation Museum in Charlotte, North Carolina, joined by Beth McHugh, who was a passenger on Flight 1549 when it made an emergency landing in the Hudson River in the middle of New York City. Beth, thank you so much for talking with us today.
You're welcome.
Tell us about that day.
Well, it was the coldest day yet that winter in New York City. It was about 19 degrees outside and it was 36 degrees in the Hudson River water. It was cold. It had been snowing all morning, so all the flights were delayed at LaGuardia. And by the time I got to LaGuardia, luckily the sun had come out. So there was a lot of light, which helped us later on in the river. We boarded the plane late. It was delayed just like everything else. We were going out of a different gate than we usually went out of for this flight. And the plane was full, completely full. It took a long time to load all the people onto the plane. And we finally took off at 3:26. And we were in the air for 90 seconds. And we heard a loud boom, like an explosion. And the plane shook and then settled down. And we thought about what happened to the engines. We were sure it was the engines. But we were thinking that it was only one engine. And okay, we'll turn around and we'll go back to an airport. After a couple of seconds, we realized there was no sound on the airplane at all. It was quiet like a library inside the plane because people were whispering, trying to figure out what happened. And we realized there were no engines. And the plane, instead of being on its upward climb, was suddenly going downwards. And the pilot banked the plane to the left over the George Washington Bridge, very close to the bridge, and then headed the plane down the river. At that point, I didn't know we were over the water, but people who were sitting on the windows, in the window seats, did know that we were over the water. And at maybe another minute, the captain said, "This is your captain, brace for impact." And everybody needed to brace in the brace position with your head down, arms over your head, if possible. And the flight attendants kept yelling, "Brace, brace, heads down, stay down, brace, brace." And we hit the water at 3:31 and a half, I think. So we were in the air for a total of 5.5 minutes, basically. And we hit the water going 150 miles an hour still. So it was a huge impact. And when you look at the plane, you can see the large 15 to 20 foot hole in the bottom of the fuselage that was torn in the plane at the time it hit, which allowed water to come in then to the cabin. And we could see it coming up immediately. It was rising very fast. So those of us who were in the back of the plane were already really wet by the time we got out of the plane. The people in the back row had water up to their shoulders by the time they got out of the back. Some people went out onto the wings. The people sitting on the exit windows had those windows open very quickly within seconds. And in those iconic pictures, you can see people streaming out onto the wings all the way out to the very end. And when I came up from the back of the plane, there was no more room on the wings. They were completely filled with people. So I came all the way to the front and jumped out one of those main doors into a life raft.
Wow, unbelievable. Did you pay attention to the safety briefing that day, or did you read the card?
I did not. I don't remember hearing the briefing so much as reading the card. I always read the cards. And now, of course, I never leave out reading cards.
How important was the crew that day?
The crew was critical. First of all, the pilots, both of the pilots, were doing exactly what they've been trained to do. And Captain Sullenberger knew exactly what he had to do to put that plane down safely in the water. He knew exactly the speed, exactly the angle, exactly what he had to do, where the flaps had to be, to put us down safely and keep us as safe as possible. Captain Skiles, alongside of him, was doing the job of the first officer in helping to go run through the checklist. Try this, try this, try this. The flight attendants, of course, had everybody where they needed them to be and kept saying, brace, brace, telling everybody to stay down. But once we hit, the flight attendants were the ones who directed everybody where they needed to go. The flight attendant in the back with us, Doreen, she was by herself in the back galley. And even though she didn't know at the time, and we didn't know that she had a very significant injury to her leg, she was back there standing up saying, no, you can't come back here, go forward, because we had known there was an exit close behind us. So we stood up and turned around to go out that back exit. But she kept yelling, no, go forward, you can't go out this way. The doors were underwater at that point.
How important is it to pay attention to this safety card and the safety briefing when you fly?
It's extremely important. When you're in a situation like a plane crash or this emergency landing on the Hudson, your mind has to have a clear picture of what you're supposed to do. And if you haven't read this, if you haven't looked at it and studied it a little bit, you don't know where the exits are unless you've gotten up and looked for them, and you don't know what you're exactly supposed to do. This is very important to know how to handle an emergency.
So literally this card and that safety briefing can save your life if you're in an emergency.
I believe so. And now I certainly believe so.
Now, have you flown since this flight?
Oh, lots of times. That year in 2009, I was still working before I retired. And I probably flew 100 more flights that year.
Were you nervous on that first one afterwards?
I wouldn't call it nervous, but I was cautious and paid attention for the first 90 seconds until we were past that kind of thing. But until we were up in the air, solid in the air, it made me a little bit nervous, yes.
So no fear of flying now?
Not really, no. It takes me a little bit of time to get used to flying over the ocean, but once I'm in the air and safe in the air, then I settle down and I'm okay.
You left your bags on the plane that day. Why?
Yes, it's critical to leave your belongings behind, and the flight attendants actually say that. Do not take your belongings with you in the case of emergency. And it's very critical to everyone's safety. It's the reason that we keep bags under the seat in front of us to leave the floor space and the aisle space clear. It's the reason that bags are locked in an overhead compartment so they don't fall out on people if there is an emergency. And if you take your bags with you, you use up space that somebody can be using to be safe, to get off of the plane. They might impede progress through the aisle. They would impede progress jumping down into a chute. Your bag might hit somebody else and injure them. The most important thing is to be safe. The bags are just that. They're belongings, and they're not people's lives, and you don't want to impact the safety of people's lives.
And you were well taken care of, even though you didn't have anything with you when you got off the plane, right?
Yes. The Red Cross people especially took care of us. The people at the ferry terminal took care of us with taking warm clothes out of their closets there and letting us put on new sweaters and pants and socks. All of the rescue people helped take care of you. The Red Cross wrapped blankets around us. Nobody was asked for ID. Nobody was asked for money. Everybody took care of us, yes.
What was the attitude on the plane? Were people calm? Were they panicked?
I didn't see any panic. Some people up towards the front said they saw a couple of people really frightened, more in shock than panic. It was quite orderly for getting people off of a sinking plane. It was quite orderly, actually. People were helping other people, but also some of the agile young people in the back realized that the aisle was clogged, so they actually started climbing over the seats to get to the exit windows. It was a good idea. It helped clear the plane faster that way.
Tell us what happened after you got out of the plane.
Okay, at the door, I hesitated because I looked down and there was a life raft hanging off of the door but hanging down into the water. And it looked like about 5 or 6 feet that I would have to jump down before I touched the life raft. So it frightened me a little bit, but the flight attendant put her hand on my back and very gently said, you have to jump, close your eyes and jump. And I did. And I landed down in the life raft. It had about a foot of ice cold water in it, and there were probably 12 people in the raft already, so I slid down into the lower part of the raft along with them.
Wow. And then after you were in the raft, then what happened?
Other people kept jumping right behind me, so the raft was filling up quickly, and at some point the captain and the first officer came into that same raft. And we looked up, it was probably 4 or 5 minutes after we were out there in the raft, and we saw these giant ferry boats steaming towards us from both sides of the river and heading towards us at top speed. So we actually felt at that point that we could be rescued.
The fact that everyone on board made it out safely is absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
You're welcome, I enjoyed it.